maju sisa melamerismo bagai turang ale menghina karakmo berkemasana dua dano ale kanti papo dua dano ale kanti papo.
Hai Jenis.
Tahu pesan pakai nanti.
Hai Jenis.
Hello.
Thank you for coming.
I did change my PowerPoint, Diana, small details this morning. So
Okay.
maybe I will send you the new PDF after. Or
Okay. Do you want to share it by your own, or do you want us to share it for you?
I prefer to share it because I have a few animation.
Okay. So you share it.
Yeah.
Co-host share it. Okay.
You want me to try or is it okay? We try later.
Yes, we can try now. Okay.
Okay, share. I cannot share now.
Wait. Yeah. Bisa?
This
I
one?
think you can start now. Yeah.
Okay. Oula, I have to remove all my
Oh,
Rio.
busy man.
Yeah. Sorry. Make it clean. Voila. So you should see it.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
Should be okay.
So it works.
Yes.
I can stop to share. Voila. Finish.
Thank you. I think Janice is already here too. Hi, Janice.
Hi, Bodiana.
Do you want you to share it by your own, or you want us to share it for you?
Let me check on my side. Give me a second. You have to let me share screen. I think I could be assigned a co-host.
Wait, Janice. Kaliki will
No problem.
make it. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, you can try
Okay.
now.
So can you see my screen?
Yeah. Okay. Do you want to try to move on?
Into the full screen?
It works. Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. Clear.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Dude. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah. Ruth, John Mark and Janice is already here.
Okay.
Yeah, but we still have 8 minutes.
Okay, we wait with 33 participants. Yesterday we have more than 60.
Okay, then I take the time to make a coffee for myself.
Okay. Okay. Sorry, we can't stand it to you.
Yeah, I'll also take a bit of a break, then I'll come back. Thanks.
Hi, everybody. Are you ready to continue? I think Harrison is here. How are you? Ibu Isli also here.
Assalamualaikum, Doctor.
Waalaikumsalam. How are you?
We are fine. we are in the same room from Manila.
Oh, that's why your sound is a bit what do you call it? Echoing. Oh. Ibu Isli, how are you? Those who have friends in their groups that haven't joined yet, would you please tell them that we are going to start very soon? Thank you. Hi, Tess. Pak Hadi.
Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, Ruth.
Okay, thank you. Okay, welcome again to the workshop on palm oil, sustainable supply chain, and sustainable landscape. I would like to remind the group, yesterday's group, have you submitted your supply chain summary? Yes, for yesterday's workshop. Okay, I hope you have submitted as the link has been delivered to you, has been sent to you yesterday. Today, we are going to talk about deforestation. Yesterday, we come out with supply chain. How can we keep the supply because it's a limited resources and then very high demand? How can we upgrade the production without with the no deforestation policy? That's a problem because land area is very limited, and the only thing we can do, just like yesterday, is just improving the production capacity of the smallholders because they own the very massive space of land that can be improved. Okay, today we have two presenters. One is Jen Makroda and Janice Lee. The first session will be given to Mr. Roda from Sirat to talk about the deforestation, followed by Janice Lee. Before we go with these topics, we would like you to join our pre-test. Again, I want you to grab your handphone. If you use tablet or laptops, you can go to www.menti.com. Okay, and then find the code 218450X7. Okay, go to www.menti.com and use the code 218450X7. The link to menti.com also set in the chat box. You can click the chat box, then the sites will appear in your screen, and please use the code 218450X7. Please respond to the questions. The first question is, what is deforestation? Answer the question shortly and submit your answer. Okay, welcome Hadi Pranoto. Nice to have you around from Mula Warman University, Indonesia.
Thank you, Pak Andi.
Okay. Yeah, so far we have eight responses. What is deforestation? It's a loss of natural habitat. It's illegal logging, okay. Extinction of species, environmental degradation, decrease in forest area, chopping wood, clearing forested land, destruction of habitats, damage without rules, running the universe, forest destruction, industrialization, harmful effect, loss of natural forests, loss of natural habitat. Okay, 15 responses so far. Destruction of forests becomes bigger. That means these words used by most of the respondents. Forest conversion. Okay, we have some more here. Extinction of species, forest area lost, loss of carbon sink, removal of forests, destruction of wild forests, harmful effect, burning, okay, we have burning, okay. Disaster, okay, 20 responses now. Then from the brainstorming, we know that the deforestation is illegal logging, and destructions of forests. That's the big words we have on the screen. Oh, clear of native vegetative. Again, you go to the next questions. What are 22 responses? You can go to the next questions. What are the main causes of deforestation? Still in the same code, yeah? 218450x7. You can respond to the next questions. What are the main causes of deforestation? Money. Money is the main causes of deforestation. Need of land. Okay. Money is a problem in everywhere. Okay, for responses, poverty, palm oil, human, tobacco, yeah, industrial. Illegal logging is also the causes of deforestation. Construction, opening plantation. Okay, industrialization, development of plantation, palm oil, need of land, infrastructure, competition of land uses, human-induced, lack of regulation, lack of consensus, land clearing. Okay, 19 responses. Urbanization, industrial agriculture, capitalism, slash and burn. 19 responses so far out of 53 participants. Hello, those who just joined our workshop, please grab your phone, go to www.menti.com, use the code 218450x7. Try to answer the second question. What are the main causes of deforestation? Okay, now we go to the third question. We have third questions, committee? No, just 2 questions. Okay, now the third question. What is the impact of deforestation? Okay, you have to keep in mind we have 3 questions here. What is deforestation? What are the causes of deforestation? What is the impact of deforestation? Again, for those who just joined our Zoom meeting, the link to the menti.com has been shared in the chat room. Please click the link and use the code 5411464. Answer the question, what is the impact of deforestation? Okay, mistrust, global warming, carbon footprint, rising temperature, climate change. That's the impact of deforestation. We have global warming, we have pollution, we have climate change, climate crisis, mistrust, animal lost their habitat.
Recording in progress.
Biodiverse destroying. Okay, 14 responses so far. Okay, the word global warming seems bigger. That means most respondents think that the impact of deforestation is a global warming. Okay, global warming, animal lost their habits, climate change, loss of biodiversity, more poverty. Okay, so the causes are poverty and money, and now the deforestation causes more poverty, natural disaster. Ecosystem fail, 19 responses so far. Okay, come on. Submit your answer. So some participants think that deforestation brings more poverty. Okay, 22 responses. Social issue of indigeneity, destroying habit. Yeah, we got two bigger words here, global warming and pollution. So deforestation will have impact on the global warming and the pollution. Okay, 23 responses. Thank you. All right, to give you a clear view of what deforestation is, we want you to watch video playback. Admin will play the video for you.
Our planet's forests are some of the most valuable resources we have. They provide us with clean air, a source of food, construction material, and much more. Even more importantly, forests are a major line of defense against climate change. A single tree can absorb as much as 48 pounds of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere each year, which makes them the most effective CO2 scrubbing machines we have. Despite this, forests are being systematically eliminated all across the world. A process we know as deforestation. Each year, 15 billion trees are lost to deforestation and forest degradation. That's 36 football fields worth of trees a minute, and accelerating. At this rate, the world's rainforests may be completely gone within 100 years. This makes deforestation responsible for around 13% of the world's carbon emissions, making it a major driver of climate change. Not only do we need trees to absorb our carbon, when they're removed, much of the carbon they had stored is released. Rapidly growing agriculture is responsible for the vast majority of deforestation. Global demand for food, especially meat, forces millions of acres of forest to be cleared for cattle, soybean plantations, and palm oil production. Timber and fuel extraction, as well as wildfires, drive the partial destruction of forests, known as degradation. All of this is driven by our relentless economic expansion and population growth, with both set to continue increasing dramatically. While harvesting timber is necessary for our economy, unrestrained deforestation can lead to the disruption of weather patterns and the collapse of entire ecosystems, threatening our safety and other resources we depend on. So what's the solution? Can we stop this seemingly unstoppable force? The short answer, yes, but it'll take some work. Research has shown that it is possible to decouple economic growth from deforestation by reconfiguring our supply chains and adopting sustainable land use policies. Thanks to the efforts of activists, policymakers, and businesses around the world, deforestation is actually slowing down in some regions. Finally, reforestation and afforestation efforts are growing worldwide. One Tree Planted works with partners all across the globe to restore damaged forests and plant new ones. You can become a part of these efforts by volunteering to plant trees in your area or supporting these initiatives abroad.
Okay, thank you. We hope that the video playback has opened your horizons on what deforestation is all about. Following the video, we have a presenter here, Mr. Jan Makoda. He is a President and Regional Director for Southeast Asia Island countries. At CIRAT, okay, coordinate CIRAT collaborative research and development and training programs with various partners in the region, which is based in Jakarta, starting from 1st September 2021. Focus research on the value of change, the industrial organization, the sustainability and the geopolitics of forests, oil palm, biomass, and biorefineries, and other plantation commodities. 6 years working at the Forest Research Institute of Malaysia and 9 years at University Putra, Malaysia. He is an economist by training, a PhD in comparative dynamics of developing societies at Paris Diderot University. Civil forest officer specialized in forest industry from the French National School of Rural Engineering, Water Resources and Forestry. Master's degree in Biology of Organism and Population and also a master's degree in geography. He is an author and co-author of more than 75 research articles, books, and book chapters. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me to welcome Mr. Jen Roda. Mr. Roda, the screen is yours.
Well, thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen straight away. And today we are going to discuss about what I call the new geopolitics of palm oil industry and deforestation. I really want to shock you a little bit. This event organized by USU Medan and Thailand is also about changing the views for the young generations and the education and changing the perspective. So I try to do that, and usually shocking a little bit everyone is going to help that, I hope, but in a gentle way. So my issue is that I don't want to discuss about the old dilemma about, between deforestation and, for example, commodity-driven deforestation or agriculture-driven deforestation. All of this is naming the evil, but is not explaining why this is happening. So we are going today to delve into the mechanism to understand how we can get out of a black and white picture and try to understand the systemic relationship between forest and agriculture. And because it is systemic, there is dynamic. So deforestation, reforestation, all of this is together. And using the example of palm oil, because it's one of the most controversial crops regarding deforestation. So first, we are in Indonesia, and oil palm is absolutely strategic item or oil or commodity for the Indonesian smallholders, and how we can see that. Here you have data, Indonesian data for plenty of perennial crops that the smallholder can plant into their small properties. And the question is which smallholder non-food plantation, here we don't have rice or cabbage or whatever, it's non-food, which of these non-food plantation pays the most per hectare from the point of view of the smallholders. And you see that clove, sugarcane, pepper, tobacco, and also oil palm and tea, these are the most paying crops. So you might think a smallholder would like to go on those crops first. Now, if you put yourself into the pant or into the shoes of a smallholder, you are going to say, okay, how much I will pay to plant and to grow my stuff. So you can look not at the total cash flow, but you may look at the total cost. You know, what is the smallholder non-food plantation that will pay the best, but per unit of cost for 100 or for 1 million rupiah that you are going to spend, or 1 million rupiah, how much you will get. And if you look at that, then you realize the clove, nutmeg, and also oil palm and are still there, and cashew. And you can go further and ask yourself, now I am a smallholder, I am not rich, so what is going to give me the best result according to my time, to my work, you know, because I'm working in my garden. So if you take as a unit 1 million rupiah of work, then you realize that the first crop over all the others is oil palm. And this is the good perspective to have. When you are a smallholder, you're not rich. So your own commodity is your time and your work. So you work to feed yourself, and then you have some extra time. You need to work a little bit to create some supplemental revenue. A normal smallholder with a normal common sense is going to go to oil palm, because this is what will bring you the most for the minimal amount of work. And if you put all those results as a synthesis in a map, you realize that seeing the cost from a smallholder point of view has two components: the work of the cost, and also the other cost than the work, like investment cost. And you see the dotted lines, they are the line of ISO costs, the same cost. So you have the oil palm, which is very close of the 1 million rupiah line. So all the crops that you can do will go there, and you have your total cost of hectare. If you're smallholder, you are going to look for the minimal cost of hectare. So no wonder you have a lot of smallholders working in that area, you know. And when you look in that area, you see that finally oil palm is one of those that gives you the most of total revenue with the minimum of work. And you have two routes. The route of high work, which brings you to rubber, and the route of less work, which brings you to oil palm. If you choose the rubber route, you will have a lot of work, but you will have less cost on the other side. If you choose the oil palm route, you will have maybe less work, but a bit more cost on the other side. And you may ask me why not everyone is choosing cashew, because cashew is ridiculously in terms of cost, but the reason is cashew cannot grow everywhere easily in Indonesia. You need some dry time, and you also need an amount of quasi-industrialization. So it's not that easy for Indonesian farmers. So you cannot plant it everywhere. Now, we understand why all the smallholders they always want to plant palm oil. There is no real secret behind that. And now I give you another perspective. You know that a lot of people blame the palm oil for deforestation, including blaming the smallholders. And one of the solutions that you hear in the media is we use imported deforestation. And if we avoid imported deforestation, maybe we are going to change something. So a lot of people think that they may regulate palm oil trade, and at least the part of the palm oil trade that is supposed to carry some imported deforestation. Here I represent the world trade, CPO trade, and you see mostly produced CPO by Malaysia and Indonesia. It mostly goes to Asia, a bit to Europe. I put in red, because I'm French citizen, I put in red what is going to France in red. So if the French government is declaring that they are fighting against palm oil imported deforestation, this is the red lines. That's where they can act. So actually, it may be a lot of goodwill, but it has a very limited effect on the real deforestation. And this is the same picture, slightly different. If you look at the refined oil, and again, the weight of Asia is very big. The weight of Europe is way smaller, and the Africa has more weight in this case. Now, I have two countries to compare, and since I have been working a lot in Malaysia, I will give you examples of what we did in Malaysia and what we should do in Indonesia. We haven't done it yet, part of it only. So here, what you see on this graph is the real Malaysian deforestation by in black, the real Malaysian deforestation. We are going to see the real deforestation by the oil palm. Here is total forest loss. And we know those numbers with a very exact number every 5 years, because Malaysia has a quinquennial plan. So every 5 years, they do all the detailed statistics of their cadastre, and they count all their agriculture, everything. And with that, they check every 5 years what is the status and what is the plan for the next 5 years. So it gives you dots every 5 years, or precise and exact quantity of the agricultural status, but also of the forest status. And then you can compare by the last 5 years, what was the exact forest loss in the 5 years. So that's why you have those, 5 year steps. So that is the real map of the real deforestation since 1950. And you see that the peak started to increase in the 60s, but the real peak were in the 70s and the 80s. And after that, it has been decreased regularly. So you know already by looking at this picture that deforestation in Malaysia is a past trend, is something that happened many years ago. It's not the reality of today. You have some remaining deforestation. You see on the left between 2010 and 2020, you have something. But this is extremely small compared to what did happen in the past. So we are at the end of a dynamic. Now, when was the palm oil extension? If you look at the same 5 years plan, you see that the palm oil extension decreased after the peak. It started in the same time of the peak, but it cannot explain the main peak. So most of the deforestation in the peak time was not made by palm oil extension. Then you see that the palm oil extension went beyond the deforestation itself. So what did happen? How it is possible? The reason is, in that zone, half of the deforestation was by oil palm replacing forest, but the other half was oil palm replacing rubber. Because the main cause of deforestation in the 60s and 70s were rubber plantation. So once you had rubber, a lot of agricultural area of rubber, you have a lot of room to replace, to be replaced by palm oil, and this is what did happen. Palm oil later on replaced mostly rubber, and if you do the statistic, it's roughly half-half. Now I introduce you to this red arrow in the screen, and this is the Global Forest Watch deforestation, and this is an NGO. I'm not blaming them. I'm going to show you that their number is wrong, but it's for educational purpose. We are in the talent program, and our purpose is to see how we can educate better and how we can do good science in order to address the real problems. So here, I went to the website of Global Forest Watch, looking at Malaysia deforestation, and I took their numbers, and if you took their numbers, the red line would have been the deforestation since 2000. So they give these numbers year by year, and I sum them by 5 years to be on the same order of graphic. And you see that their number is highly discrepant with the number given in black by the what is the real data, actually, the government Malaysian data, which I checked myself when I was working inside the government office of FRIM and later on at the university. So my discourse here is that the Global Forest Watch deforestation rate is inflated more than the reality. Why it is so? So to them, there is a minimum of 2.15 million hectares of primary forest that disappeared since 2000. And how they can arrive to this conclusion? So I give you another map here, which is the real evolution of agriculture and forest and forest excluding Sarawak and forest including East Malaysia, Borneo, Malaysia. And this is a figure is produced by me. It's published some years ago by my team. And you have on the top the decrease of the forest. So you see that the forest has been decreasing over the years, indeed, and that nobody can say there is no deforestation in Malaysia. There were deforestation, and you see that the steep part was, as we saw in the last pictures, in the 70s and 80s. And you see that in the last year, since 2000, it's flattening. So how it is possible? You have here what I call the scientific uncertainty. I put a bracket, and to arrive to the level claimed by today Global Forest Watch, Global Forest Watch says since 2000, that the starting of the red arrow, we were at a bit more than. No, they don't say that. They say that today we are at almost a bit more than 17 million hectares of forest, and they say that we lost 2.15 million hectares of primary forest. So if you put the arrow back, it brings you around 22 million hectares of forest in 2000. And if you look at another number, which is the tree cover, so it's not that the primary forest is more than the primary forest. This is the number. The number bring you to almost 25 million hectares in 2000. And of course, 22 million hectares of primary forest or 25 million hectares of tree cover, it brings you to real forest area that were in Malaysia in the 60s or in the mid 70s. So how come they can make such a gross error? How such errors can happen? So such errors can happen if we understand how remote sensing works. The team are good willing, and there are people working on satellite data is available now everywhere in every computer all over the world. And how does it work? You get a satellite picture like on the left. You know, you have many colors. All of this is representing the what the satellite did you. You put that in the computer. You use different algorithms, and you get what is at the right. A classified map, a map where you have, say in this example, 4 land uses. It can be more, it can be less, it depends on the map you're looking at, and it depends on the country you're looking at. And it depends very much of the algorithm that you're using. So in this case, you have a real picture that gives you water, forest, urban zone, they call it asphalt, but it's urbanization in gray, and agricultural soil. So that's the classification, and they use that classification to compute the hectares of forest. Problem is, you have many different algorithms and many different methods. So this is an example of the same picture that will give 9 different maps if you use slightly different algorithms. So that's the job of the scientist to choose the best algorithm. So let's say that the middle one is the best algorithm. Why not? We usually select a small square into it, and we use it to calibrate the error of what we are doing. Calibrating the error is doing that is looking at when my classification tell me that this forest, that is agriculture, or that it is shrub, or that it is whatever as a land use, how much is my error on that? And normally, remote sensing works do that work, and they give you tables like below. I took that one from a scientific publication, and here it's not Malaysia; it was something made in the US, I think. Corn, beans, pasture, grass, wheat, and others. And you see that the accuracy, which is the column on the right, can be only 47%, sometimes 80%, sometimes only 20%. So you have very different accuracies when you do those computations. So that is telling you that the forest or the grass or the corn or the land use that you're measuring, its accuracy could be as much as 80% or could be as low as 20%, which tells you in reverse, the error can be 20%, can be 50%, can be more than 50%. So you may have a number given in hectares at the end, where you may have plus or minus millions of hectares, if you look at the scale of the country. So this is the way it works. You have your remote sensing that allows you to give a classification. You are going to check that with reference points. You are going to check that with the cadastral information, because you need to make sure that you are not measuring forest in the middle of the lake. So you are going to remove all the pixels that your computer says is forest, but if they are in something that is not forest into your cadastral information, you remove them. And you do this selecting work, using physiography, other administrative data. You also can update this information year after year. At the end, you get a final map made of colors that allow you to compute a final area. And all of these land use, they have their area and they have their error. And you have a accumulation of classification errors, cadastral errors, administrative errors, bias errors, update errors. All of this has a scientific name that we call error propagation. So you have formulas. I give you here the direct formula or the standard deviation formula. At the end, what you do is basically you add those errors, and you get at the end X% of your total error. And that's very important that you interpret your area that you measure every year when you follow the evolution of deforestation, for example, knowing those errors. Coming back to this picture, we have this gross overestimation by Global Forest Watch, and here I speculate, probably because they took each year pessimistic scenario of the different scenario they could calculate, and they totally forgot to take in account the plus or minus error of their number. For example, your result might be Malaysia is 17.2 million hectares. And the next year, your result might be Malaysia is 17.15. But if your error is plus or minus 1 million hectares, the two numbers are no different. They are below the difference, the significative difference of the two measures. Then in this case, you should say there is no difference because what we observe is below the sensitivity of the tool that we're using. But if you don't say that and you add all those differences and you always take the worst because your agenda is to show that there is something happening on the field, you may end up doing gross errors. So my discourse here is when we discuss about deforestation, we have to be extremely careful to use science, methods, and unbiased views. And sometimes it's difficult because if I was working in an NGO, which work would be to catch deforestation, I would have the temptation to use the most pessimistic scenario and to forget that when I measure the deforestation with my remote sensing tool, I have an inherent extremely wide error. And remote sensing errors usually are around 30%, you know. So when you have 1 million of hectares, plus or minus 15%, it's a lot of million hectares as well. So if you apply the same reasoning to Indonesia, this is what we have done. You have the million of hectares that are reconstructed, and you see the peak of deforestation happened just before the 2000. You see that the palm oil extension actually came quite late in the story of it, and there were a boom very recently. Of course, after that, there were a moratorium. And you can impute the deforestation by oil palm by this red zone. Nowadays, I didn't do for Indonesia the work that I did for Malaysia, you know, comparing the remote sensing and the accurateness of the Global Forest Watch. That means that the students can work on it, many people can work on it, this work is open. I continue now beyond the deforestation itself. So now you know that deforestation data can be extremely misleading if you're not looking at the error and the frame that you need to interpret them. What about imported deforestation? How useful is the concept? So let's take the worst hypothesis. Let's imagine that 100% of oil palm would cause deforestation. We know it's not true, but let's imagine that worst case. We know also that only 68% of the production is internationally traded. So already all the green zone that is remaining on myself, you cannot touch. Imported deforestation will not play on that green zone. It could play maybe on the blue one. But who is looking at imported deforestation? Is it all the customers looking for or buying palm oil overseas? No. Today is mostly the EU. So grosso modo, a little bit less than 10% of the production. So the implication is when we play on the imported deforestation, actually we play on 10% of what would be deforestation if 100% of oil palm would cause deforestation. Of course, less than that is causing deforestation. So we play on really on much more. So is it an effective tool? For the public opinion, it's very effective because it's highly powerful for your imagination. But to address correctly the real deforestation processes, no, it's not an effective tool. It is addressing correctly the feel-good need of some population in Europe, that's for sure. But it's not solving the real problem of the smallholders in Indonesia at the end. So let's put palm oil industry and deforestation in a global perspective now to try to understand what is behind all of this. So here you have the map of not only palm oil, but all vegetable oil a few years ago at the world level. So it's by a big region, you know, Latin America, North America, Southeast Asia, and so on. So you see the world of the production and the consumption of vegetable oils. And if you put that in terms of where you grow that and how many tons per hectare you produce, and that idea of tons per hectare, it is the idea of sustainable intensification of agriculture. You need less land to produce more. If you do sustainable intensification, then you can produce more tons per hectare. Then you see that many countries or regions are very bad into the criteria, but Southeast Asia is the one which is naturally already the best. And it's not because Southeast Asia is better than the others. It's basically because Southeast Asia is the main producer and the main place of producing palm oil, and palm oil, oil palm is one of the most productive plants on earth, so it demands less hectare to produce more. So that's why Southeast Asia has this natural blessing. Now, if you look at another criteria, which is the footprint, you have heard about that. The footprint is how many hectares you will need per capita. Then, when you place all your palm oil, world palm oil production and consumption in the world, you see that one quadrant is the bad. That's South America and North America, because they produce their vegetable oil using a lot of hectares per capita. And at the same time, they are using, they are producing not so many tons per hectare that they're using. At the end of the picture, you have the good, which is Southeast Asia, where they use not so much hectares per capita, and they produce a lot of tons per hectare. And in between, you have the whole intermediate countries, including Western Europe, and some that are really in the bad part of the classification. Now, all those volumes of and millions of tons of vegetable oil, if you put that at the world level and you compare to the ability to invest by the world, the ability to invest, you can measure it by the GDP, the gross domestic product produced at the world level, and which is at that a few years ago was 80,000 billion USD. If you imagine, okay, that's my ability to invest into sustainability. How does it present to my regions, to my components? Then you move that, and then you realize, oh, some regions, they produce a lot of oil, but they have not so much investment power. That's the case of Southeast Asia. Other regions, like North America, they produce not so much oil, but they have more investing power. And you see that discrepancy between investment power or the capacity to improve or to invest into the sustainability and you're already producing and consuming situation. So, for example, on the map, Western Europe has theoretically an excess of money compared to their ability to invest into the sustainability of their own oil palm. And Southeast Asia has a deficit of investment power. So you see, the world is not equal in that matter, and you could dream in a perfect world or in a fair world that there would be transposition. People who have more investment power would give some of their investment power to the regions who have less. That's if we are dreaming, and that's not the reality actually. So what is happening in the reality, in the world? You have a segregation between the south of the world, where you have typically in those tropical regions less investment power than need for vegetable oil, and in the world, northern world, more investment power than typically the need for the oil, except Russia, that I put in the norm, but they behave more like a South country in this regard. And if you look at the oil crop seeds, you know, the seeds that you use to create oil, you see the surplus of production is in America, and deficit is mostly in Asia and in Europe. So the trade of the seeds, like soybeans, for example, is in that direction. But if you look at the vegetable oils, deficit and surpluses, then the surplus is in Southeast Asia and in Asia, and the deficit is in India, in Africa, and in Europe. So the fluxes are all in this direction, mostly going to India and the South Asia, and a bit going to Europe. So you understand now why there is a crispation. And if you put that in terms of productivity of vegetable oil per hectare, then you realize that you have a world that is already productive enough for its own production. It is the north. And you have a world where some part, like Malaysia, is extremely productive, but some other parts, like South Asia and Africa, are still very low into their ability to produce. So you have a very real challenge to finance the sustainability of those productions. I show you now on the last picture, all of these are the same regions with their production and consumption. And you can do the surplus and the deficit. And you realize that if you do that, the European world Union is the only northern region with significant oil deficit. And Southeast Asia is the only southern region with a significant oil surplus. That is just explaining you why you have a constant diplomatic conflict, if I would say, between EU and Southeast Asia. Is because one is the big producer and the other one is the big demander, the one in deficit. So this is the source of the diplomatic tension. Now, when you look at the major producing oil seeds, palm oil produce a lot, but demand very little hectares per ton per hectare compared to the others. So this is a source of the other challenge, because in Europe you don't grow palm oil. You grow soybean, sunflower, and rapeseed, and this is demanding a lot of hectares. So this brings us to an evolution that happens all over the world, but I use here the French example. Over the centuries, when people became less hungry until they stabilized with their total energy intake, that is the black curve, their intake of cereal and potatoes and pulses increased and now decreasing, and their intake of vegetable products and fats, vegetable fats and oils increased. You see that stabilization here. And you have the exact same picture if you look at the kilocalorie in the diet. So the carbohydrates come down, the fat come up. So what you have there is a trend that you find everywhere in the world, which you can illustrate by this one. When societies are becoming richer, they have more income, or when they are becoming more urban or with more cities, their intake of fat products and vegetable fat is increasing. And if you look at that in the world by developed country, you see the developed country already reached their saturation level. They are not going to consume more. But the developing countries and the least developing countries are going to continue to have more and more need for vegetable oils. So they are going to need more agriculture. They are going to need more land. There will be more tension eventually for the deforestation, if you see that well. And this is the same picture, but by region in the world. So in red, all the deficits, and in dotted lines, the assumption of what could be the saving. And if you use those numbers to do the projection by 2050 using demographics, you know that we are bound to consume at least 250 million more tons of vegetable oils by 2050. So the real challenge in the future now is how you make the mosaic. So this is a picture of that mosaic. The forest is not well represented, but you have the forest and you have all the other agricultural land. It forms a system, and these systems needs to produce much more to feed the population in the world. There is no discussion. It's in terms of millions of tons, hundreds of millions of tons. And at the same time, we don't want more deforestation. So we need to find the dynamics that allow that mosaic to work more efficiently, more sustainably, producing much more, and in the same time, preserving the forest. So forget the rationale of commodity-driven deforestation. Try to look at how my commodity can work in harmony with the deforestation or in harmony with the forest, and how it can produce much more and consuming less space. So with that, I hope that I was in the time. Maybe I was a bit too long, but okay. Sorry for that. Let's work together for the tomorrow's agriculture. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jean Rhoda. Very interactive picture you have shared here. Following presentation of Mr. Jean Rhoda, I would like you to join me to enjoy the presentation from Miss Janice Lee. Miss Janice Lee is an assistant professor at the ASEAN School of the Environment, NTU Singapore, focus research on socio-ecological systems such as the consequences of rural land use and land cover change on biodiversity conservation and human livelihood, South Asia's oil industry, food security concerns in Asia, fire activity in Sumatra, and ecosystem restoration and cropland abandonment processes in Asia. She has a PhD in environmental science from Imt-Gt, Switzerland, and a Master of Science in Biological Science from National University of Singapore, and her bachelor's degree, second-class honors in Life Science, Concentration Biology from National University of Singapore. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me to the presentation of Miss Janice. Janice, the screen is yours.
Okay, thank you so much, Rudy, Sophia. I'm going to share my screen now. And if you could let me know if you could see the screen.
Okay, perfect. We can see your screen clear, Janice.
Okay, thank you so much. Also, thank you to Prof. John Rhoda for his very interesting talk. I thought I learned also a lot from that presentation, having a very global perspective of the vegetable oil consumption and also production, and to discuss, the oil issue in supply and deficits. I thought that was really very interesting. So I think from my end, I had actually presented, or rather I would be presenting a little bit more about the role of, these issues. Also, towards the end, bringing in the role of Singapore, because Singapore is it's not a country that produces palm oil, but it is a country that's very involved in the trade of palm oil and also very involved in the production of palm oil, because many of the companies that are based in Malaysia and also Indonesia also have their businesses in Singapore. So I will run through the first few sections of my slides quickly, because I think maybe some of this have been covered yesterday. Just a bit of an introduction to myself. I'm from the Asian School of the Environment and also at the Earth Observatory Singapore. We are quite new as an institute in the Nanyang Technological University of Singapore. But if you're interested to know more about the Earth and Environmental Sciences, please feel free to check out our website. I work actually on the ecology and biology side of conservation, but move more into social and ecological systems, especially during my PhD, where I conducted quite a few interviews with smallholders in Riau, in South Sumatra and West Sumatra. And right now I am leading this team of PhD students, postdocs, and research associates and assistants in the Couple Human Natural Systems Lab. And so this is my team. We are very diverse in our research interest. And, I think, we are very excited to also work in this region. Recently, I've been involved in justice, equity, diversity, inclusion issues. So I think, apart from the topics that, we discuss as researchers, it's also important to, construct a inclusive and also a culturally sensitive environment for academia. So the work that I do is mainly falls in the topic of land system science, which looks into like what actually was being mentioned earlier, the remote sensing part of it and also the spatial analysis part of it, where we use satellite imagery to monitor and track land use change, but also to go down to the ground and to talk to people and to also measure things on the ground so that we are able to be informed about what's happening on the ground. Because like what was mentioned earlier, there's a lot of errors that are also propagated when you're looking at images from the sky. And sometimes, you do need to go down to the ground and to ground truth what you're seeing, and whether or not deforestation is happening, or you're just looking or observing a rubber tree being converted to an oil palm tree, for example. So that, in that sense, doesn't really fall into the definition of deforestation that actually started when, the presenters were asking you guys for what your definition of deforestation is. So having these two approaches is important. And then ultimately to bring these two pieces of evidence to talk about the land use dynamics using models. I have three main points. One is that land use change is a major contributor of climate change and biodiversity loss, as you guys have also discussed in the session earlier, about deforestation being driven by agricultural commodities. So we can debate, what is the extent of the deforestation, because as being mentioned in the previous speaker, there's a lot of clarification of the terms of what forest is and also the time period of deforestation. I'm actually quoting the same stats here from Global Forest Watch that was being mentioned by the earlier speaker. And it could be that to some extent, these figures are debatable. But just generally, if we're looking at the extent of recent forest clearing, a lot of it is coming from these more than four. We call it the big four, which is like cattle, oil palm, soy, and also pulp, wood, and paper. But there are other commodities like cocoa, plantation rubber, coffee, that are causing small-scale deforestation at the frontiers, for example, in the mountainous regions. And I think for me, I sort of present this in line with what I have written in this Channel News Asia opinion piece about why forests matter and also what we can do to protect them. And I wrote this piece specifically, targeting Singapore because we are a major agricultural trader. And I think, the policies that we put in place in terms of regulating our businesses in Singapore can do a lot and can have an outsized impact in terms of how the processes on the ground are being executed. So my outline for today's presentation would be generally to talk about the peatlands and also forests and their benefits, but I think I would go through that quite quickly in the light of the half an hour that I'm given. I'll also talk about commodity-driven deforestation, what the effects are, specifically focusing on palm oil, but I think everyone here is actually very familiar with that, so I might also go through that somewhat quickly. And then lastly, to talk about Singapore's role in sustainable landscapes in Southeast Asia. So starting off with forest, I think, this is something that might be already well known to all of you, since we also have folks coming from Thailand, people who are in Malaysia, Indonesia. I think you're very well aware about the role of forests in this region and how it's an important site for biodiversity as well. We often call Southeast Asia a biodiversity hotspot. And if you're interested to know what that means, a hotspot for biodiversity just means that in these locations, it's where you have a high level of endemism. So you have very unique species that cannot be found elsewhere, and also a very rapid pace of habitat loss. So if we look at Southeast Asia, we are just right smack in the biodiversity hotspots in the world. But of course, we're not the only ones. You can see on the map where the other biodiversity hotspots are. And this often overlaps with the tropics because that's also where countries are developing, they're looking into clearing land for other land uses. So there's this competition of land. And so that's also where we have high levels of endemicism. And therefore, lots of the biodiversity hotspots tend to be concentrated in the tropics. There are many different forest types when we're looking at the forests in this region. I won't go over most of them, but focusing mostly on the lowland forests and also the peat-swamp forests that we have in this region. So forests bring lots of benefits in terms of carbon sequestration, water regulation, for biodiversity, and also it provides a source of livelihoods for people, right? So people derive, say, their livelihoods either by extraction of the natural resources, or they also derive other kinds of ecosystem services from these forests. So, for example, a connection with the forest, cultural identity, their spiritual identity as well. But as mentioned, there are these threats related to the threats related to forests, things like logging, things like conversion to agriculture, things like fires. And these are all very challenging issues to address. Just generally, if we were to look at Indonesia, the trend of primary forest loss as being detected by remote sensing has been increasing over time. So in this case, this is from 2001 to 2012, right? I don't really have those figures that are past 2012. This is drawn from a study by Margono in 2013. And you can see that this change in forest cover also differs across the different islands. So in Sumatra and Kalimantan show more forest cover loss simply because, they had more forests to begin with. And if you were to focus more on the island of Borneo, so Borneo consists of Indonesian Kalimantan, you also have Malaysian Sarawak and Sabah, and also the state of Brunei, right? We can see that deforestation trends have been pretty rapid over the last few decades, since the 1950s to present time. I was talking about this map earlier and how, when I was a student in the 1990s, we often talk about Kalimantan forest as a very impenetrable heart of Borneo kind of like forest. But now when we look at the forest cover in 2020, we can see a lot of it has already been cleared and converted into either because of fires, so they are mainly just wastelands, or they are converted into plantations. And just generally, the loss of forests can lead to the loss of ecosystem services. So it isn't just the relationship of the losing of forests to the loss of biodiversity for nature's sake itself, but also can affect us. So, for example, one of my PhD students, Mohammed Nubis, he's working on the land cover change in Aceh and looking at how that is related to events with regards to flooding. So trying to track, spatially, what are the patterns of deforestation and also patterns of flooding frequencies in these areas. So I talked quite a bit about mineral forests. What I'd like to switch over here is about peat swamp forests. And peat swamp forests are a very unique ecosystem because whenever the biomass decays, and falls to the ground and it decays, it often just decays and the carbon is going into the ground, it's going into the air, it's going to the animals or to the insects. But in a peat swamp condition, the water or the soil is waterlogged. So whatever biomass that falls into these conditions, they remain or rather they decay at a very slow pace. So this process of slow decomposition of biomass over thousands of years leads to the accumulation of peat. And the development of peat ecosystems are really unique. They are found in the coastal areas of Sumatra, in Kalimantan, also in parts in Sarawak, generally because of the rise and fall of sea levels and a very unique geological history in Southeast Asia. So a lot of the peat deforestation is related to the drainage of canals, the logging of these peat swamp forests, the conversion of the peat swamp for industrial plantation development. And more recently, people have also been pointing towards the conversion of these forests by small-scale farmers, for example. So it's a very complicated and complex history in terms of how and why this deforestation had taken place. But one of the key things about opening up a peat swamp forest is that the process of drainage is very damaging to the peatlands. So this diagram shows you how in an intact peat swamp forest, your water table tends to be located very close to the surface of the soil of the earth. And once you create canals, right, the water table starts to decline. And that exposes the peat over here to air. And that basically kickstarts the process of decomposition and oxidation, basically. And a lot of carbon is being released from these peat soils. In drought conditions, in conditions where there's really very little rainfall, and also if it's a season where people are clearing land for agriculture, if the peat catches fire, it is quite difficult to put that fire out because the fire doesn't just burn above ground, it can also burn below ground. And that's where you have even more a faster rate of decomposition and release of carbon into the atmosphere. So the end stage of such a process, process of degradation, will mean that you lose the entire people in that area. And that also means that you are losing lots of carbon and bringing that carbon into the atmosphere, or it can also go into the oceans because the dissolved organic carbon moves through these riverine channels towards the seas and also the oceans. So this is an example of how fire over peatlands look like. You can see the smoke plumes coming out from the peatlands. And when I was, conducting fieldwork back then, when we were allowed to travel, we also witnessed how the fire was moving through the landscape. In this case, the fire is moving through the above ground, so we call these surface fires or flaming vegetation. And you can also see how in the peat itself, there's smoke coming out from the soil. So this is an example of fire burning below ground and smoldering peat. And with the consequences of the fires are tremendous, right? I don't think I need to explain a lot about this, but you have lots of health and also livelihood effects. This is an example of what we call the rallying effect. So because of the biomass burning and also the very fine particulate matter from the burning, it interferes with the movement of light, and that basically leads to the reflection of lots of light, except for the red wavelength of light. So whatever that you see in this area, because of the high density of particulate matter, results in this very dystopic kind of like red landscape that you see here. You also have the loss of plantations, like this is a smallholder oil palm plantation, and I think this is a dragon fruit farm that is being lost to the fire. And this doesn't just affect, of course, the areas where peatlands are located. You also have the transboundary haze effect. And just for scale, I can show you Singapore as this very small up here, and also the city of Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, right? So environmental issues know no boundaries, right? So the movement of winds during the monsoon period then brings a lot of this smoke haze across the borders and then into Singapore and also into Malaysia. All right, so I'll talk a little bit about the topic specifically on palm oil. I think it's being mentioned by also by the previous speaker. I won't go so much into this because I think all of you are quite familiar with this. But just generally, right, I think what was being mentioned earlier about commodity-driven deforestation, there was a map that was trying to pin down where deforestation occurs and what causes deforestation. So this is a paper published by Curtis et al. In Science. And you can see that the bulk of the deforestation happening in South America and also in Southeast Asia is caused by commodity-driven deforestation. So somehow, right? It doesn't just have to be palm oil. It could be another coffee or cacao or pulp and paper. Most of the deforestation in the continent of Africa is driven by shifting agriculture, and then you can see in North America and Europe and also in East Asia by forestry. So that is basically the growing of wood for timber. So focusing on Southeast Asia, we don't grow so much soy. We don't really have that much cattle, but all these other commodities we do have, and these are being used to create everyday consumption products like paper, wood, and also what we are familiar with, palm oil here. It's a very versatile oil. I don't need to go into this too much. And recently, or not so recently, the market for biodiesel to use palm oil for production of fuel. So I was involved in an oil palm and biodiversity situation analysis by the IUCN Oil Palm Task Force. Together with a group of people, we were looking into reviewing the evidence related to oil palm and also biodiversity. And I think a lot of the findings that we had sort of aligned with what Dr. Jean-Marc Roda had mentioned, things related to the perspective of palm oil, like looking at all vegetable oils, right? Palm oil actually has got the highest yield. It is actually a really helpful crop. If we look at the use of pesticides and also other kinds of inputs, it is actually one of the lowest footprints compared to all the other vegetable oils. So what we wanted to investigate in this, I think, paper was to really pull together the state of the evidence related to things of oil palm and also environmental, the nature of oil palm and environmental issues. We didn't delve too much into the social aspects of it, but just generally pulling together information related to like deforestation, biodiversity, ecosystem services. So in this case, the team worked together to really try to pull together maps related to where oil palm is located. And the most recent one that has been mapped out for the whole world comes from this paper, I think Descalz et al. I'm not sure if it's a preprint now or if it's really been published, but the team from this group of authors had used Earth Engine to try to map out where oil palm is located using both satellite optical data and also radar data. So optical imagery gives you the spectral reflectance of the light coming in and then being reflected. What radar does is a more active way of trying to detect the land cover by sending out pulses and then to try to use the reflectance of the pulses to understand the structure and the integrity of the land cover. So the good thing about using radar is that you are able to bypass clouds. Whereas with optical imagery, cloud is also another contribution of error when we're looking into land cover classification. So detecting oil palm from forests is a very challenging classification problem, because when we look at mature oil palm, it does look a lot like forest cover. However, there are some parts of the oil palm structure that can give it away and say that, this is distinct from the aspect of forest. So that's how, scientists are able to distinguish what is an oil palm land cover and also what is a forest cover, notwithstanding all the errors that are associated with what was being mentioned in the previous talk. I think that is also very well acknowledged. One of the challenges with detection of oil palm plantations come with whether or not it's an industrial or if it is a smallholder oil palm plantation. And I think with the recent advances of remote sensing, they've been trying to push the frontier and trying to distinguish exactly what is a smallholder and also what is an industrial oil palm plantation. And you might wonder how they actually do that. So with industrial plantations, you can observe rectangular grids, I think 30 by 10 meters, that are more distinct in terms of their shape. They're a lot more orderly, and that's like reflected in on the corner left, the corner left, the top left image of this slide. And we're looking at smallholder. It's quite mosaic from the satellite imagery. It's very disorderly. They are growing at different ages in terms of the oil palm plantation. So that is reflected on the corner right, top corner right image. There's a lot of discussion as well, and also a lot of debate about what is the role of oil palm in deforestation. So in this situation analysis, it turned out it was a very difficult task to actually try to also pin down the numbers. Because so many, and we're not talking about the numbers that are given by the government statistics here. We're looking at independent studies done by scholars that are looking at the tracking of land cover change from oil palm and also deforestation using satellite imagery. A lot of studies have been published. The studies vary in terms of their spatial extent. So some of them only study Sabah, some of them study only Sumatra, some of them only study like one province in Kalimantan. And then these studies also vary in terms of their temporal extent. So some studies look at 1972 to 2015, some look at 2000 to 2010. So actually pulling together the evidence from third-party sources like all these independent studies was quite a difficult task for two reasons. I mean, one is that the metric that's being used to report deforestation and also oil palm is different. So on the figure A, you have the metrics that are reported related to deforestation from oil palm. So of the extent of deforestation that's happening, how much of it is coming from oil palm? And that metric is different from what you see in figure B, which is the oil palm expansion into forest. So you might have, 10,000 hectares of oil palm. How much of that was actually coming from forest? How much of that is actually coming from rubber? How much of that is coming from grasslands? So the different studies actually reported very differently in terms of their metrics of oil palm related deforestation. So what the situation analysis team did was to basically pull together all these different studies and to group these studies into countries that is reported here. So you have countries like Malaysia, Indonesia, which are our prime countries for palm oil. Southeast Asia, as you see here, actually excludes both Indonesia and Malaysia. So what figures that are reported here include things like Myanmar, Thailand, other countries in Southeast Asia, perhaps Philippines. But I guess, we're all very keen to know about Malaysia and also Indonesia. And you can see that, these individual dots, they represent different studies across time, and they range, from almost close to 0 to like up to 75%. Likewise for Indonesia, there's also a very wide range, right? But for the demonstration of this plot, I think this is basically the median of, the reported studies in terms of deforestation from oil palm. That's close to 50%. And for Indonesia, I think it's between probably about between 15 to 25%. And if we look at oil palm expansion into forests, so that is a different metric compared to what I talked about earlier. The median lies above 50% for Malaysia, and also for Indonesia, it is between 25 to 50%. All right, Peru is also quite high, right, in terms of like the oil palm expansion into forests. But just take note, for example, Peru, the total extent of oil palm is actually not very big, right? So, however, whatever that is expanding in Peru is taking over forests. So these are just some figures that may be helpful in terms of our, in terms of supplementing what was being mentioned in the earlier talk. I just also wanted to highlight, where oil palm in terms of their expansion is taking place, especially in relation to peatlands, is important. So we talk about the importance of peatlands, and we can see from this map here, quite a lot of the peatlands in Sarawak are dominated by oil palm, and also on some of the coastal areas in Sumatra and parts in Kalimantan, but these are not very prominent. Quite a lot of the peatlands actually are coming from the acacia plantations, which is being used to produce pulp and paper.
Janice, you have 10 minutes to finish.
10 minutes, okay, thank you. All right, so just to talk about also the change in land use and also trade-off for ecosystem services. That's also part of what the team did when we're looking at land use change and also biodiversity and ecosystem services losses. So whenever we change a natural ecosystem to a more intensive land use like croplands or plantations, you lose a lot of other kinds of ecosystem services, but of course the service for crop production is very high. So I think, like what was being mentioned earlier, how can we actually preserve that high or maybe medium level of crop production and yet at the same time sustain all other kinds of ecosystem services, which I'll talk about later in the third section of my talk. All right, I won't go into too much detail here. So just to show you like what were some of the findings with relation to the conversion of oil palm to forests, how does that affect species, for example. So when we look at the axis here, a decline in the y-axis and also a decline in the x-axis tells you that you have a declining species richness and also total abundance in the taxa that we're looking at in this graph. Also, there's a review of what are the ecosystem services that are affected by the conversion of like forest to oil palm. I won't go into this as well, but there have been quite a lot of studies that have been produced on this topic. And what are the social aspects of it that also are affected by oil palm expansion? This is not something that was being covered by the IUCN review, but just generally, I think if we're looking at the aspect of agrarian change in these areas, it very much depends on who are the people and what were their starting conditions, what are their circumstances when oil palm enters into the landscape, and that will determine their trajectory of change, whether it's for the worse or for the better. Right. Sometimes the rapid loss of these forests and also the emergence of new crops means that communities also have to adapt very fast to these changes, even though either by their own will or maybe not by their own will, but they still have to adapt and maybe plant oil palm in order to survive. So there's a very wide range, right, of like livelihood impacts or effects from oil palm expansion. I won't go into these as well. It ranges from very amazing crop for people to be able to advance in their education and also in their livelihoods, into a completely different scenario where people's lands are being grabbed and people have been forced into like poor labor conditions in order to live off their land. Right, so there's really a very wide range. It's very hard to actually categorize this or to say that it's good or bad. And I think generally we can say that the livelihood outcomes depends on the time frame of the analysis, the starting conditions, and also the types of actors that are involved in the study. Now, just ending off with like this presentation, I wanted to touch about Singapore's role. And we're talking about supply chains here. So this is an example of the supply chain of palm oil from production to trade and consumption. And you can see that, of course, you have the plantations playing a major role, and we often focus on the plantations. There's really a whole host of actors that are behind the supply chain, from processing to marketing to retailers, right? And you have lots of countries that are involved. I think was being mentioned earlier also. Very nice like flow diagram showing the movement of palm oil from the producing countries to the consuming countries. And Singapore is actually very much involved in all aspects of these steps for the palm oil supply chain. So how do we actually try to overcome some of these challenges in relation to trying to regulate or to attain sustainable palm oil? So some, I think maybe I don't need to talk much about this. You'll be looking at this tomorrow under certification. So we have the RSPO, and also in Indonesia, we have the ISPO that looks into best practices in the plantation. And then with these best practices, they will be certified and provided a premium. We've also looked into the effects of the certification program, and based on our own studies where we combine spatial data with econometrics, we were able to show that in Sumatra and also in Kalimantan, there were differential positive impacts related to certification, especially in the aspects of reduced deforestation and also primary forest remaining. Also, the issue of land pollution seems to have reduced in places like Kalimantan. We also tried to look at the social impacts of certification, and in this case, we did show a positive impact for private educational facilities in Kalimantan. But there's a lot of nuance to the results of this study. So if you were to segregate this information into, I think specifically geographically where these effects take place, you will see that these effects also change quite a bit. So uptaking of this certified sustainable palm oil is very important. And I think, this is something that will be discussed a bit more tomorrow, because we do see some preliminary positive effects of certification. It's not perfect, of course, it can be improved, but just to say that, if we want to really see a change in practices, we do need to provide that incentive to producers and also to get retailers and consumers to be committed to also purchasing certified sustainable palm oil. And one of the very interesting studies, being a assistant professor at the Nanyang Technological University, is that one of the students had her own initiative to survey people who were selling food about the palm oil that they were using, and then try to convince those people who were selling food to switch to certified sustainable palm oil. So she produced a report together with another team of researchers from an NGO, and then they surveyed also the students in NTU, which is my university, and they found that students were actually willing to pay a slightly higher premium for food that is being that uses certified sustainable palm oil. Of course, we cannot rely completely on consumers. Pressuring the companies are also an important aspect of trying to change the industry. And this is an example, or this is a graph that is taken out from the SGX. So this is a Singapore trading organization. So in order to trade and to have your company listed on the Stock Exchange of Singapore, the Monetary Authority of Singapore has really mandated a compulsory sustainability reporting for all companies. So all companies have to talk about their disclosures in relation to their business and also climate change. And we see that of the reports that are being submitted by these companies, almost 50% do discuss climate change as an important factor that affects the environment, their social, their governance issues in their business. 35% disclose their performance data in relation to climate change, but only less than 2% reported their disclosures in a framework that is very ideal to supporting these kinds of disclosures. So perhaps of the 35% to 1.9%, the rest just use their own ways of reporting, which might not be standardized and which might not be the kind of detail that we would want in terms of how companies report back on their climate change disclosures. So there's a lot that businesses can do, and a lot that Singaporean, especially businesses based in Singapore, can do in terms of reporting and also being more transparent about it. So financiers, traders, processors, consumer goods companies, these are also another aspect of actors in the supply chain that Singapore can act on. And then lastly, in terms of governance and also in terms of how we can also look into pressuring producers to to clamp down on their bad practices would be through the law. So this is a Transboundary Haze Pollution Act that Singapore had passed in 2014 or 2015. And enforcing these laws in order to ensure that the best practices like no burning is being enforced on the ground, also ensuring that government-linked investments in Singapore support sustainable practices on the ground. So the state-led funders, the state-led investors, should also try to do their part in terms of promoting sustainable landscapes in the region. So, for example, Norway's Wealth Fund had ditched 33 palm oil firms over deforestation. And that's an example of how risky it is for a producer to continue or to sort of like neglect sustainable practices and an incentive for them to try to move in that direction. So I think just to end off, right, my final slides for this presentation, we discussed the ever increasing demand for palm oil, especially in low and middle income countries that are developing. There'll be more people. They're moving into a diet that is also of high fats and also of low carbohydrates. And I think that's definitely important to address in terms of like supplying the nutritional needs of people in these countries. One of the studies that we also looked into was to try to understand, are these vegetable oil production, is this vegetable oil production going towards also food that might not be so nutritious? So we were also looking at the ingredients that were being supplied to processed foods, which we call junk foods. And we also see the similar trend that as people move into an urbanizing kind of phase, and that's also where the trend is for low and medium income countries are in. We also see an increase in the uptake of processed foods. That is because people's lifestyles are very busy. They want to eat very quick, easy foods. So there is also this component of palm oil that's going towards these kinds of foods. And we also need to think a little bit more about the relationship between the land and also nutrition. And to what extent, that palm oil is going towards, nutrition that is supporting the healthy dietary requirements of people. And also how much of that palm oil might be going towards the nutritional needs that are actually empty calories. And it would be very egregious if, we are deforesting to provide people food that actually has a very low nutritional content. So that discussion between agronomists, nutritionists, ecologists needs to be there as well. And thinking also about the plantations, right, the mode of production. We often think about plantations as sometimes being new because they are like in frontier areas, but these are really a part, think of colonial past also, right? These are new but old forms of production, these plantations. It is really a way to try to improve efficiency, increase productivity, and a lot of the old ways of managing like collective land ownership have been removed, and so the imposition of individual property ownership is something that has roots in the colonial past. So many of these kinds of concessions that we see, they are really installed in order to maximize use and to try to utilize the land to its fullest potential, which is great, right? And of course we would want that. But at what cost, right? And if we want to instill, sustainable intensification, then we also need to make sure that the land that is being used to maximize use isn't coming at a cost to the soil fertility, to the biodiversity that's around it. So I think questioning also, what is the value of having a plantation system, and how this also has got legacies in relation to the colonial era. It's also very important because a lot of the methods that are instilled in the plantation, they have these roots in expansion in parallel to the colonial practices in the past. So can we actually find a new form of production that can help maintain biodiversity, help maintain ecosystem services, and yet at the same time, have that production value for communities that rely on palm oil, because it is a very valuable and a very economic crop, right? So I think in the past, people used to talk about agroforestry as a way to try to incorporate oil palm expansion and, creating a new normal with palm oil agroforestry. So what does that mean? So for example, this is the oil palm crop surrounded by other kinds of crops or trees or fruit trees. And then here you have in contrast to a monoculture plantation, which is just full of oil palm plantations. So we have had this discussion before, maybe I think 10 years ago, about the use of palm oil in agroforestries. But I think this debate or this discussion is sort of has a resurgence as well, and trying to ask, what modes of production can we allow oil palm to continue? Because we know that it's a very valuable crop, but yet at the same time, how do we cut back on the impacts on the environment? So I think with that, I end my talk.
Okay.
I'm sorry if I over time.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Janasli. Very nice insights. Now we have a new perspective from the presentation. Before we jump to the discussion session, we would like to play a short video on Imt-Gt. Admin, please share the video.
Hello to all people in University of North Sumatra. I would like to talk to you about what SURAT is doing in terms of training, especially on training on the topics of sustainable management of plantations. I would like to talk to you a bit about the Talent project. Talent is a project which is designed for education and changing a bit the way we are teaching and lecturing the topics which are important for the sustainable management of plantations. We would like to share with you a vision of sustainable landscapes, because it's not only what's happening in the plantation itself, it's also what's happening around the plantation. So the plantation is in the landscape. So we would like to show you how we can manage the plantation in a sustainable way while thinking about how it is integrated in the landscape. So what we realized very quickly that the plantation managers are more and more becoming sustainability managers, and they are in charge of more and more topics which are really related to sustainability. I will give you a few examples of them, like anticipate and adapt the plantation to climate change, the delivery of quality product with full traceability. This is related to the connection to the markets. Take care of the communities, of course, not only in the plantation, but around the plantation, people in the forest, people who are looking for better products. So this is all the environment of the plantation. It can be just around you, but it can be in another part of the world, because people who are buying palm oil, who are buying rubber, they would like to know how and where this product is made and produced, especially for agricultural product. And of course, our role as sustainability managers and future agronomists is to protect biodiversity and to promote the idea that biodiversity is useful for the plantation. So we'd like to follow a very simple strategy. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want talent to be part of the renovation of master and undergraduate courses, and also for professional, and also for people from the banking sector. Also, talent is designed for reaching manager of cooperatives, executives from the bank sectors, as well as students and young professionals. So we'd like just to make a few changes, but also to renovate the lecturing by itself and the way we are connecting also the lecturing with the fields. And the project will work in 4 different countries: Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam. These are the boundaries which have been negotiated with the funder, which is AFD. I would like to focus on a few numbers of commodities: timber, oil palm and rubber mainly. So our targets are this group of people, the students, of course, the plantation managers, the cooperative managers, and also the bank executives, because we would like to connect the banking sector with education, especially on sustainable plantations. So the project, of course, is delayed because of COVID. We are now at the end of the feasibility phase, which will be closed in December 2021, and then we will very soon, after the signature of MOUs, we will engage in the organization of the talent trainings and lecturings. Talent is designed by CIRAD. CIRAD is my institution. I'm a French scientist. I work in Indonesia for a certain number of years, more than 20, and CIRAD is committed to build on excellence, to engage in world-class research and development projects. So CIRAD will implement the project, and the funder is AFD, which is a French agency for development, AFD, and which will provide 1.2 million euros for the success of talent. So without, I would hope we will share some questions during the workshop, and I wish you all the best. Take care of yourself, take care of your family, and see you very soon in Medan. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you. Now we go to the discussion. I believe you have a few things in your mind about the deforestation issues, what has been presented by Professor Jean-Marc Roda and Dr. Janice Lee. Please raise your hand, or you can type your questions in the chat box so I can read that for you. Okay, let me check. Okay, we have one question from Dr. Dena Khalid. Please, Dr. Dena Khalid, you can ask your question.
Yes, sorry, I started first while waiting for the students because I cannot read. It's very interesting, especially the one that you present, Jean-Marc, about the comparison between palm oil palm and other commodities. And I'm a bit surprised that the payoffs per hectares of oil palm is one of the lowest among the others. And then is there similar things to per unit of cost? Is there any influence of the variations in their productivity, in their input usage, especially fertilizer, especially in Indonesia, when we see the range of productivity in the same year and the range of their practices in using the inputs. And then, of course, we know that a fluctuation in the market prices is quite frequent, and especially now the price is very high. And what is the condition when these results comes? And because why I ask this, because we always assume that oil palm is one of the commodity that can be used to increase or improve a smallholder's livelihood. And then we assume that if we got the higher productivity per hectares, we can get higher profit or income, and then we can avoid more deforestation. This is really interested. It interests me, especially when you share the ISO cost graphic and things like that. I would like to hear more explanation behind that. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So yes, it is very well known already that palm oil is a crop that naturally produces a lot per hectare. It's a perennial crop, and there is continuous fruition. So naturally, it produces a lot. Of course, you can always produce more. And actually, the numbers I gave in my figure is around 3.5 tons per hectare. Is dismally low because the best clones, the best practices go up to 11 or 12 tons per hectare. So it can be per year. It can be much higher. And also you have a lot of difference, as you say, whether you use the fertilizer in a good way, because sometimes you can use a lot of fertilizer, but you can put too much, doesn't make any difference. Or you can put them at the right moment or not at the right moment. So you have a corpus of practices that can be optimized. Even when it's not optimized, it's producing much more than the other crops. When you optimize it, it goes beyond the charts. And naturally also, it's consuming much less inputs than the other crops per ton of what you produce. So you can always optimize it anyway. The really interesting point is people were thinking that it's because it's profitable. It is profitable, but you have other crops that are very profitable as well. The difference with the other crops is palm oil has a kind of ubiquity. You can grow in a country like Indonesia, you can grow it in many different places. Some other crops can be much more tricky to grow because you need the know-how of the farmer. And some do not grow in every weather, in every, So the plasticity of palm oil makes it a wonder crop in that respect for small farmers that are not necessarily very skilled. They can grow, they will get a result. And of course, this result won't be perfect. If you train them, if you give them a lot of knowledge, they will increase the productivity. They will not need much more. So that's one area you can play on. But the second fundamentally important stuff that people don't have in mind is when you're smaller, basically you're very busy and you don't have a lot of money. Your time is extremely precious. And you might be totally busy sustaining your own life, doing crops to have your survival. When you're in that case, that's a really bad case. If you're just beyond that, you can sustain yourself and you have still more time to do something else. That's when you go into the cash crops. And sometimes you may even say, oh, I go to the cash crop directly because I will raise enough money quickly enough. And with that money, I will buy my rice. So you have those strategies. But the average smallholder is looking for crops that are not so expensive in terms of time. So the palm oil is fantastic because with 1, 2, or 3 stems in your garden, you can grow already enough pocket money that it doesn't need you to have a lot of time. You may invest in time, but you will be free more the rest of the time. So when you compare all together, at the end, the burden of time or work that you're going to put or to input in it is light. The comparative cash that you will get is very high, and that makes it the real wonder because it allows you to start something and during that time you're going to do something else. So you see you have some free time. With that free time and the cash that you get from the palm oil, you may be able to go into the city to start a second business and so on and so on. So the palm tree can be a transition crop that allow the smaller holders to leave the state of absolute poverty and subsistence to the status of a small entrepreneur, even very small. And you have a continuum of all the cases. And when you look long enough on the continuum of smallholders, you will see that some of them are already little industrial. They have over the time, because they got knowledge and so on. It's a process. They save enough money to invest in some more palm oil and so on and so on. And at the end, they may not own, but they may collect the work of plenty of other smallholders. They are little entrepreneurs that are acting like a little cooperative, you know. They may have under the name of their association, like sometimes 100 hectares or more. And they put them in power to negotiate with the industries, or to negotiate at mini level. And you have, at the other hand, the guys who have three stems, you know, of palm oil, and they raise a little bit of pocket money out of it. This continuum makes it a wonder crop. That's why it explains why so many smallholders are attracted by this model. And the associated issue that you have to it is, so don't look only at the cash, look at how compatible it is, this crop or another crop, to your conversion from someone poor to someone a bit more wealthy. I don't want someone very rich, because to become a little entrepreneur, you need some skills. But many smallholders find that crop as the way to become, to change from the situation of being really poor to becoming, you know, entering the middle class. So it has a political power that very few people outside Indonesia can imagine. Because if you multiply the number of the smallholders with their families, and you imagine the position of a governor who look at the landscape, you know, the land use, and can equate that in terms of promises, you know, to its electorate to become, you know, to enter the middle class. Palm oil is a very powerful tool, and that's why it is also a tool that is so difficult to counter measure. You know, we have a limit of the trade tools. You know, the trade tools are the tools that, as Janice showed, you know, you may play on the labors, you may play on the price, you may play on the sanction by banks or sanction by many other ways. But at the end, you have a limit, and if you look at for example, the FPO numbers, it is flattening, because you can touch a number of industries. You don't touch all the industries. For example, you cannot touch the industries that have no direct contact with the international markets. Plenty of them are, you know, just in the local market. You cannot touch them. You don't touch all the middlemen. You don't touch all the ecosystem of industry that are in the local governance, but outside the reach of those tools. And that is the real issue. The real issue to me is to look at the ecosystem or the eco-complex of these small orders, and to try to understand how we can, inside them, to go to better practices. It's okay to have tools that are sanctioning on one side, but we are reaching the limit nowadays of those tools. So we are entering the era where we need to understand all the interactions. And when I was speaking about the mosaic, I had in mind also the fact that you might be a small burst, you may plant different stuff, or you may have small plots, and you may have a rental of someone or something else, but because you got a little bit richer, you're going to be some rice there. You have pictures of, you see the palm trees, you see the rice, you see everything in between. And the same guy may also interweave his activities with other activities in the city. You know, because I give an example, the cash crop gave you a little bit of surplus. This surplus did allow you to buy a little pickup. This pickup, you are going to use it at some part of the time for the crop, but some other price you are going to use for the other guys. So you are starting another service. And when you look at the ecosystem of all these intrication of activities, that's where the critical intelligence of those activities need to be in terms of the sustainability. It can be sustainable or it can be non-sustainable. A good example of that is using the seeds as criteria. You know that you have different seeds. A seed is an input, but bad seed or good seed, apart from the price, there is not much carbon difference. But the productivity will be so different at the end. And if you track this tool, I call it tool or a proxy, you are able to see whether the little ecosystem of the farmers is balanced, because people will have education, will have services that will give them advices, and they will be able to buy the better seeds that will make them producing more with less inputs and so on. And if they are if they're already in that situation, it is because they have some support, some knowledge, some information, and that is a trace of something which is working well. And in some other places, you don't have that, and you see people using fake or fake seeds, or not fake, but seeds, stolen seeds, or seeds that are a fair certificate, and you have a circle of poverty there. And that's my point. My point is looking at, we don't understand yet very well how those eco-complexes are working really. And to me, the challenge of our research nowadays is to mix what we know in terms of agronomy, we know it very well. In terms of ecology, we know it very well. We can still know better, but we have, as Professor Chanis did show, we are already reaching very good levels of understanding what is happening. The frontier of our understanding is the intrication of all these activities in the landscape between themselves.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Rhoda. Yeah, thank you. I have to turn off my camera for a while because I have a signal problem here. Jenny, there are questions in the chat box. First, if deforestation is increased every time, it seems to get a lot worse than it. Is there any method that we can reduce it?
So deforestation seems to be a lot worse. I think there was some comment that was being made by about how deforestation is presently at its lowest level since decades in both Indonesia and Malaysia. Actually, that's true. I think actually the deforestation rates have actually declined quite a lot. However, it's still happening. And I think if we are looking at deforestation, we need to be quite context specific and to try to understand, where is it happening. So, for example, we do see recent reports of deforestation happening in Papua, which is very concerning because Papua is basically the last bastion of very intact lowland rainforest. However, there are plantations and concessions there. And what is the future for these plantation concessions? Will they continue to deforest or not? So how and the methods of what we can do in terms of stopping deforestation has to be pretty local to regional in terms of solutions. Of course, the global solutions could come into play. So for example, there are some pressures that we can introduce through the supply chain to try to encourage companies that are producing palm oil to not conduct deforestation. So there are pressures from, say, the consumers, or also from the retailers, the traders, the financiers, to try to encourage the producers not to deforest. But we also do need the regulating environment to ensure that if deforestation doesn't come from palm oil, that it also doesn't come from any other crops, right? So it doesn't mean that palm oil doesn't enter into this land, but you still need to make sure that other kinds of activities like logging or other kinds of rubber plantations are also not leading to deforestation. So you do need that local to regional solution, which I think comes from strong governance and also from monitoring of this deforestation over time. It is a very complex issue. So it is it's a very tough question to answer. Yeah, I don't know whether that helps, but if you have more questions to put it in, yeah.
Okay, so not only blaming the palm oil industry, right? Because it's a complex situation.
Yeah,
okay.
I think you have to look at the landscape, and also to encompass all the other sectors too. Yeah.
Okay, Professor Nakoda, can you say how we can explain this deforestation, because people are pointing at the palm oil, as Alan said yesterday, it's a sexy farming. How can we inform people that deforestation is not caused by the palm oil cultivation itself?
Well, this is more a geopolitical question, because actually, if you look at the real numbers, nowadays the palm oil is not deforesting much. It's really the lowest level we have seen. Still, the blame is there, and that's in the picture. The main reason, and you have many other causes of deforestation, and in some that are urbanization, some they are just anthropization, and in general agriculture, but not only agriculture. It's just the anthropization of the system. You know, you can always go back to that, and also to the weak governance. Janice spoke about strong governance. The main cause of deforestation is weak governance. It's even not the crop itself. Any crop, it's not a crop. It's there, and the issue is behind the governance itself. We need to realize that there is a competition at the world level between production systems. The planet is finite. It has a size that cannot expand, and the population is growing, and we need to feed this population with more protein, more fat products, more sugar. Sugar and staple, that's already done. We have already the production. The fats is the demand of the fat is increasing, and we know already that we are going to need millions, hundreds of millions tons more. So the competition is there. Who is going to produce that? Who is going to process it? So the real issue behind the blame game of deforestation is the Southeast Asian companies are too efficient. They are the successors of the post-colonial model, and they are the post-colonial model. The colonial model were already something extremely efficient, able to produce a lot of products per hectare. It was not perfect. It has its issues, but what you see nowadays is the perfection of the system in an abundant world. And these companies are not producing. Behind that, you have conglomerates. You know, you look at all those companies, they started as maybe a forester or planter, and nowadays they are in multiple activities, real estate and so on. But if you look carefully, they are in activities that are combining together, help each other, and help to produce a set of produces and services to fast changing society of the South. And what is happening now is they are taking share in the market of the Western companies who were traditionally producing that. They were the feeders of the world, of the cities in the world, were traditionally the Western societies. And what we have now is companies from the Southeast Asia are too competitive, and they're starting to gnaw, into the market shares on this Western world. When they do that, they gnaw into the geopolitical interests of the country in the West, and they're starting to sell back their products into those Western countries. They are starting to buy back some companies, some industries into those Western countries. So this is the real fight that there is, and the blame game on deforestation and one crop on the others is just an epiphenomenon of this deep industrial war. Or, if you don't want to label it as a war, better to label it as realignment or where the wealth is, where the production is. The Western world has been the producing world and the wealthy world. And it is realigning now because the society is getting older in the Western world. And in the Southeast Asian, you still have a thriving society with plenty of young people, plenty of ideas, and they are going to Africa, they are going to Brazil, and and they are answering to the questions or the needs of the South. So this is where the real engine of the blame game of who is deforesting or who is doing that. And if you suppress palm oil, don't worry, it will be something else. So it's not the palm oil issue. It is the societies fighting with each other to control the world, I would say.
Yeah, okay. It's very complex, yeah. Okay, so I return back to Janice. Using palm oil-based product is going to prevent further deforestation because it only uses a small amount of land. Is there any significant difference in quality between palm oil-based product and not palm oil product?
Well, I'm not sure what quality means. Is it nutritional quality or if it is?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Nutritional,
I'm
right?
not a nutritionist. I don't
Okay.
quite know how to answer that question. Yeah, I mean, like at the end of the day, when we look at the oil, we're talking about vegetable oil, and so especially I think if we're looking at processed foods, which is the kind of work that we did about 4 years ago, we were looking at not just palm oil but also soybean-based oil, and these oils are somewhat substitutable, unless in certain processing, that there is a need for palm oil because of the way that it holds the food together, because of the chemical temperatures that it can withstand in the processing. Then sometimes palm oil is more preferred, and I think also in the US because of the I think the removal of trans fats or the ban on trans fats, that has also a significant implication about the movement of palm oil also into the US market. So there's quite a few aspects on the nutritional side and the quality of the food products that are coming from palm oil or non-palm oil based products. But I'm not a food science tech person. Maybe that's something that food nutritionist or food science person could answer. So I cannot quite say whether it's a better quality or not. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Another question. Opportunity cost is very important. We see interactions with OP. If OP can get less time, incentive relatives to its output, does that mean there is an opportunity for agroforestry? Okay, Professor John Makora, can you respond to this, talking about opportunity costs?
Yeah, first, Connor is always asking the tricky questions. It's a trademark. Thank you, Connor. I wouldn't put it in terms of agroforestry versus plantation, because I really see the stem of all different scales, and agroforestry is one scale of mixing the activities. You may have bigger plots. If you take some zoom, back and you fly over, it will look like again mixed. It depends on what is the scale. So whatever the scale you are taking, you will have a mix. And a landscape, to me, a small region is also an agroforestry, because you may have a plot of 2 hectares of palm oil and another plot of 2 hectares of something. When it is, it's like in forestry, do you mix feet by feet, or plots of 2 hectares by 2 hectares, or bigger plots? I'm not so sure that the terms are agroforestry versus plantation or non-agroforestry. The terms to me are in terms of whatever we do at whatever scale is the practice, the ideal, the optimal practice, and that's far from being the cases in many cases, not only in palm oil, in many other crops, but in palm oil particularly. When you look at the numbers, they just tell yourself, if you do a reasonable well plot, you produce probably 6 to 7 tons per hectare without to make too much work. And what we see in average is 3.5 or 3 something in Indonesia or Malaysia. That just tell us that in most of the case it's really far from optimal. And to me, it's not because it's planted in this scale or go for it. It's just because people are not doing what they should do. They are not putting they are not using the good seeds. They are not using the good cultural itineraries. Following what they need to do at the right time. So to me, the frontier is there before. And of course, once you reach that level, then probably you can work on the fine-tuning on the scale. Which scale is the best balance to reach all your, outcome that you want to have in terms of different species, other animals, birds, and everything. There might be some level or some agroforestry scale that are better suited than some others. And that may vary also according to the place and the altitude and so many other factors.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Again, I'd like to remind the participants, please feed in the attendance, please. The link has been shared in the chat room. Please click the link and feed in your attendance list for today's workshop. Okay, so as yesterday even we discussed about this supply chain from plantation industry, and you know in Indonesia we call it the green gold. Okay, green gold. This is very promising business in palm oil. Okay, honestly, because most people think that oil palm plantation really turns the forest into the agroforestry business. Even some writings we know that in Indonesia they try to make a research on how much hectares of oil palm plantation can replace a forest. Because this business is the first to blame of deforestation. Even I watched a very big banner on the road with very eye-catching pictures with orangutan, you know, and then with a very nice caption next to the orangutan, they say, "Don't palm oil us." How do you respond to this, Chelsea? Because now people think that oil palm plantation really do great things to the deforestation problems.
So I think I see Jean-Marc Rota raising his hand. You want to go first?
It's up to you. You can go first, and then I will follow.
I will just say a very quick point about that. I do think that the communication related to palm oil, you know, is a very tricky subject. I think that, you know, the way that we have communicated the problems of palm oil have been, you know, I think have over succeeded maybe, because I think like 10 years ago, right, nobody cared, right? And I think the businesses were just thinking about palm oil as a sustainable issue. And, you know, I mean, we cannot deny the deforestation that had happened in the 70s, 80s, 90s related to the expansion of oil palm, the peatlands. I mean, if you see some of the recent trends also from 2000s to 2010s, 2010s to 2020, some pockets of like, you know, intact forests are being cleared for oil palm. So I think that's something is something that is very clear. Well, the trends, overall trends, you know, this we can talk about, and I think we really showed quite some very evidence related to like the trends of deforestation that very much depend on the context, the time frame that we're looking at. So a lot of the communication of this, right, I think happened, you know, back in the early 2000s, and there's very strong opposition against palm oil that really changed the perception of companies. And then, you know, I think a lot has been done in the sector to really try to change their way of producing palm oil. And I have to say that, you know, I do think that, you know, if businesses put sustainability as a priority. And I think previously I listened to the talent workshop and how many plantation managers now have to be sustainability managers. It's a very difficult step for them to transition into a sustainability manager because they have been trained to produce the highest yield. Now they have to know about RSPO. So there's a very big step that they have to take, right? And I think if businesses are able to really, you know, encourage that and to incentivize that, I do think that there's a lot of positivity in terms of like how the industry can change over time. That said, you know, it's not like, okay, all that thing that happened about deforestation didn't happen. It did happen. But I think, you know, it's hard to sometimes change the public perception when that had already started in terms of communications back in the 2000s and 2010s, and now trying to show this different side of oil palm. Yet at the same time, there are bad actors that are still operating, like in Papua. So how do you actually try to, you know, show that the palm oil sector is very heterogeneous? There are good actors, bad actors. I think that's where the communication back to the public or, you know, back to the NGOs could help. But of course, there are some people who are beyond reason. So it is very challenging to then discuss these issues because it's a very emotional kind of like topic. Yeah.
Yeah, if I can follow up on this, I will go back to the issue of the forest as well and the orangutans. What we are seeing nowadays, the results start to emerge from different places, is actually many of the different wildlife can survive in those landscapes where you have palm oil, and sometimes patches of forest or corridors of forest, or you know, kind of, if not agroforestry, you know, a loose mix of different patterns of palm oil and remnants of corridors of forest. Usually, those forest remnants, they are there because it was more expensive there, or because they were along a river or a road or some elevation features. But whatever is happening, you have a fabric when you look from far, where you have a mix of agriculture and a mix of forest, and you see that somehow it preserves part of the wildlife, not optimally, because if you look at a perfect, big, fat chunk of forest, then this is the ideal forest ecosystem where you have, when the size is big enough to have the scale effect of that chunk, of that space, all the component of a good forest ecosystem. But when it's eaten or with small holes from the agriculture, you still have some properties. So you have research on that. The place where you have no research is actually in the institutions, because those landscapes, if you look at Indonesia, they are everywhere. In everywhere you have agricultural patches inside forest territories, and you have also in agricultural lands plenty of trees, covers, or semi-forest areas. So you have an intrication of the two. And while the wildlife can live with it, what cannot live with it today is the institutions. The institutions are still a Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Forestry, a Ministry of Road and Peatland, Badan Gambut, and so on. And it starts to happen, but the real ability of those governance tools to manage the landscape and to make the best decision for this wildlife, for the balance, and also for the farmers to live somehow together. We are far from the optimal. So this is also a place where deforestation it will still be the issue, because it's an easy picture to use. While the real problem is more into the ability of our governance or our institutions not to work in silo anymore.
Okay. All right. We see that from deforestation a lot. We have questions here from Yeni Marita. There are, from deforestation point of view, a lot of damaged land like in Kalimantan Island. Is it possible for us to limit the land use for industry and keep some forests in order to continue to provide carbon needs for humans? What do you think, Professor Roda?
It's always possible to limit the deforestation. To me, it's even not the question of the industry. It's not the machines who are deciding the fate of the forest. It's not the industries who are deciding the fate of the forest. It's the men, it's the people. And the men, at the end, are governed by laws and governance and also by their wallet. So what you observe is every country where you have a mix of poverty and weak governance. Not everywhere in the country, but it suffices that you have some parts of the country where it's more like the worldwide in the West, in the westerns, in the movies. It suffices that you have such situations to have degradation of the ecosystems and wild behavior of any actors. So it's not the industry itself, it's not the crop, it's that complex issue of how we make the governance, because usually the governance is better when the people are richer. So, what is the egg and the chicken? Should you make the society faster wealthy to have a better governance, or should you, work on the governance? But if the poverty is poor and full of tensions, the governance will never work. So, it's a difficult process from the society which is, to me, linked to the maturity of the middle classes.
So, do you agree that if we keep the wallet of the people living in the forest not empty, they will not do any deforestation?
You're speaking to people inside the forest. If they have a full wallet, the people in the forest might be able to fight the pressure against the forest. And if you make sure that the wallet of everyone is full, then you don't need to acquire more land, isn't it?
Okay. I return back to the Dr. Janistri. Just curious here, we have a question from one more Anani. Why only palm oil get much attention regarding the use of deforestation? How about other vegetable oils? If we can see by comparison, palm oil is more efficient in terms of land use compared to other vegetable oils which needs 9 times more land to produce the same amount of oil?
Yeah, thanks very much for that question. I think that, as mentioned, I think there are some very eye-catching images that sometimes also links the palm oil issue or exaggerates it a little bit more. But I mean, I think I disagree that all attention is on palm oil. There are recent papers that try to talk about the impacts of other kinds of oils and also try to make that comparison of palm oil in relation to other vegetable oils. So one paper, I think, looked into coconut oil and then also talked about how actually coconut, as like other kinds of crops, when we talk about removing palm oil, then what is the next substitute and how does that actually affect the environment? So they do actually quantify it, like, what is the species that affected for coconut oil. They do the similar kind of biodiversity and ecosystem services studies from coconut oil. But you receive a lot of flack. And not so much because that it wasn't a well done study, but I think there was a lot of ire against like the comparison with coconut and also palm oil, and I think that unfortunately the study didn't gain much attention in terms of like talking about the environmental issues associated with coconut oil. I do think soy oil is actually getting some attention, but I think soy doesn't really, or the issue of soy doesn't really come in the issue of oil, but in the beans that are being provided for the livestock that is the market in China. And colleagues who are working on land systems, they also look into the issue for soy expansion in South America. And talk about what are the challenges related to that. This multi-stakeholder organization is not as well formed or not as mature in terms of its standards compared to the RSPO. So in some ways, I do think that the strong pressure and attention on the palm oil industry has actually quickened the pace of developing the sustainability standards, of getting people on board on this trajectory of sustainable palm oil sector that now is actually outpaced like other kinds of sectors like the beef, the soy, the pulp and paper. Like oftentimes when we talk about like multi-stakeholder organizations, RSPO is being brought in as a not exactly like a shining light, but it is kind of like one of the more advanced stakeholder organizations that try to bring the industry together. So yeah, I mean, like, the pressure does work in some cases. It quickens the pace of that, it kind of whips the industry or the actors into shape. I want to comment a little bit about the earlier question about Kalimantan and land degradation. I think apart from economic aspects, of course, I think we also have to talk about power and also how power acts in that landscape. And how, perhaps people do want to continue planting whatever livelihoods they have. But because of the, disproportionate power at the hands of agencies that are present in the landscape or in the corporations that are present in the landscape, communities who perhaps, are okay with their livelihoods, right? Maybe not very wealthy, but have a very strong relationship with the land, especially like indigenous communities living there for a long time. That it could also just be that they don't really have the voices in terms of land use decisions that are being at play, in the landscape. So apart from money, which is a very important driver, of course, I think the politics and the aspect of power also comes into play in terms of whether land gets to be protected or forests get to be protected for the needs of humanity, right, of the climate change issue. So it's a very complicated, it's a very complex and complicated issue that I think entails the pulling in of interdisciplinary studies like the social sciences and also the natural sciences. Because if we just approach it from a science-based kind of approach, we miss hearing the voices and also the perspectives of people who are living on the ground. Yeah.
Okay. Prof. Rhoda, what do you think? Why palm oil doesn't get much attention?
Okay, it is historical. It is also easy. It's something very easy to capture because of the orangutan and so on. It's a story that is easy to tell. It's almost too caricatural actually to be true. But the real problem is not. No, it's not a problem. The reality actually is far from that because most of the palm oil value is not in the oil itself. The oil is the final product for only when you fry it or you consume it like this, but it's a part of the consumption of the oil. It's mostly south consumption in the Western countries. Very few people use palm oil into their salad or into their frying pan. How it is used is it's used mostly in the industry. It is transformed into many products. Some of them are soap and cosmetics. Some of them are molecules that you find in the perfumes, or you find in the ink of the cartridges. You know, your ink cartridge that you have at home in the COVID time. There is palm oil in it. I mean, the molecules that are derived from all the oleochemistry. And what people don't have in mind is our civilization is based on the oleochemistry or the organic chemistry of the oil from the ground. You know, the fossil fuel, the fossil oil, charcoal or petroleum. Palm oil is one of the, like other vegetable oils, that is rich enough in terms to produce a whole chain of similar oleochemistry, doing the same products. You make plastics, you make composites, you make styrofoams, you make ink, you make everything. All the, even fuels and energy. All those products are totally invisible on the debate, and that's the bulk of it. So you may have the surface of the debate where basically in Europe, some farmers that cannot compete against palm oil because their oil will be structurally more expensive and demanding more space than a tropical oil. So they use all the tools that they have to fry this oil on the surface, but underground, their industry is already taking it, and it will never stop. They will, the biggest biorefineries of oil palm are not in Indonesia and Malaysia. They are in the Netherlands, and they are continuing to flow to supply the Western world with those compounds. And once oil is not an oil anymore, it's a molecule with such a esoteric name that you cannot think that it is oil, it's finished. You know, you don't have the orangutan anymore. So, and this is the real volume of the iceberg, you know, below the tip. So, yes, you have that much attention, but I think that much attention is just something diverting from the real business. The real question to me is, why it is so that still today in the 21st century, I mean, there is a reason, but why it is that the Indonesia and Malaysia are not as fast as they should into capturing the added value of all those oleochemistry chains, because the know-how is still now in Europe, but they could invest. I mean, if I am thinking strategically as a leader, I would be a leader in those countries. I would put all my money to capture the know-how, to hire the engineers, and to build my own oleochemistry here, and to flood the world with that, and to keep the added value in here. That is a question why this is not happening yet. It is on the starting slow, but very slow, I have the feeling.
Thank you, Professor. I believe that the participants here now have a very clear picture of the reforestation, the causes, the impact. Okay, we have discussed a lot. But again, let me remind you again to fill in your attendance, please. If you still have some questions, you can ask directly to the presenter, or you can type your questions in the chat box. I will read that for you. All right. Okay, I believe the participant is, they have a very clear picture of what it is. Then now we can go for the post-test. Again, grab your handphone, go to www.menti.com. Okay, please share the link. Admin, you can share the link here. Okay, the code is still the same in the previous one in the morning, 21845087. Please give us your opinion. What is deforestation? Okay, again, go to menti.com, use the code 21845087, type your answer and submit. What is deforestation? We still have 52 participants around here. All right, deforestation is land clearing. Land clearing is a very popular term in plantation. So deforestation, land clearing, okay. If you're using your laptop, you can click the link in the chat box and use the code 21845087. Try to type your answer and submit. So deforestation is forested, land clearing, land use change, forest to plantation, timber production, uncontrolled destruction. Okay. We have a new view now of what deforestation is all about. Global warming, carbon, okay, destroy the forest, destroying forests. All right. Land clearing is getting a bigger word now in our screen. That means that most of us understand that deforestation is land clearing. All right. Then response so far. Deforestation is also clearing of forested land. Deforestation is global warming. Okay. Deforestation, chopping wood. Deforestation is also clearing land for reason. Clearing for cattle. Land usage. That's 13 responses. Okay. Clearing of forested land, clearing land for reason, land clearing, forest clearing, forested land clearing, okay. And it is also uncontrolled destruction for global warming. We have here chopping woods and stuff, cutting and destroying. Great. Okay, let's go to the second slide. Still the same sites and code. Next slide. What are the main causes of deforestation? Same code 21845087. Type your answer and submit. Okay, the main cause is cattle rearing, human induced. Production increase. Agriculture is the causes. Poor governance, okay, urbanization, corruption, industrialization, agriculture activities, poverty. Then the word agriculture is bigger, and that means it drives more attention that the main causes of deforestation is agriculture, timber harvesting, land use change, agricultural expansion, need of land. Okay. Okay. Lack of consciousness, high demand for land. Human needs, poor government, again, the land use change, plantation. All right. Okay. Yeah. Do we have the third slide? The third slides. Okay. What is the impact of deforestation? Again, now in Imt-Gt.com, the code 5411464. What is the main impact of deforestation? Loss habitat, pollution, climate change. The impact of deforestation is loss of habitat. It also creates pollution and makes a climate change. It contributes to the global warming. We have four responses. Okay, footprint, extinction. Climate change seems the most reason of the most condition of the impact of deforestation. Greenhouse gases, okay. No, somebody type it wrong. You type again the code 5411464. It should be answered. Pollution, footprint, loss of biodiversity. 15 responses so far. So we all believe that the impact of deforestation is the climate change and global warming. In addition to loss of habitat, pollution, health and environmental footprints, extinction, carbon increase. Okay. All right, there is the last question. One of the participants has a problem, and so they would like to ask a question. I can give time again to the speaker to answer this. We see from the point, from your presentation, that intensification is the best solution instead of expansion. Yeah. Okay, the questions to both speakers. Is that what should be the primary concern of mechanism in order to attain sustainable practices? Because they say intensification is a better solution instead of expansion. The question is, what should be a primary concern of mechanism in order to attain sustainable practices? Ms. Dr. Janice Lee, can you respond to this question?
So the question is, what is the mechanism towards more
primary concern, yeah.
Primary concern.
What should be the primary concern of mechanism in order to attain sustainable practice?
Okay, so the mechanism, I think, in terms of trying to attain sustainable palm oil practices, I think it differs across the actors in the supply chain. And if we are interested to look into smallholders and to try to encourage them for, the mechanism to try to get them towards sustainable palm oil, I think finance is definitely up there. We're trying to, help them to move towards that, to adopt those practices that are needed, which are not easy. And also the knowledge transfer in terms of like what are the best practices to attain the best yields within their plantations. So I think the knowledge transfer and also the finance would then be the key ways in order to try to, especially I'm talking about smallholders here, because I think the bulk of the audience is actually working more on smallholder palm oil. So yeah, I think these two are the key or primary ways in terms of mechanisms. Yeah.
Okay, Professor Roda, what do you think is a primary concern of mechanism to attain sustainable practices?
Fundamentally, I think we need to work into the direction of how the institutions work together. And that's the challenge. There is already some amazing pilot or developments in that way, in Indonesia. When you look at the KPH, the forest units, the new model of the forest units in the Indonesian administration, where you see that they are already first, they change of way to work. They engage the local populations. They help them to find solutions that are beyond forestry itself. So in order to better manage the forest units, they help the people to sell better their ananas or their other products, their fish and whatever, because the analysis, all of this is a continuum of activities. When you increase and you help the people to work on their own little agendas, but in a coordinated way with the global aim, which is to manage correctly the forest, that works better. So these kind of units do not exist yet into the agricultural units where you have bits of forestry. So that should be the next stuff. And it doesn't exist to work at the bigger landscape, to have, when you go at the bigger scale. So there is, in the future, probably, some evolution to do in the institutions for the institutions to work more cooperatively. I don't know how, but the model of the KPI is already some promising model. To expand this stuff is probably a way to go among others. And I think this is where we can lay the basis for the biodiversity, for more sustainability. Let's never forget that sustainability is not one action, is not one domain or one specialty. It's usually made of plenty of small details on different actions on different domains. So we inherit of a society that were organized by silo. Everything was thematic. The disciplines, the scientific disciplines, the political arena, the governance is in agriculture or in forest, and you cannot overlap. So the future of the sustainability is probably in the bridges that we can create between those components of our society at different level. The level of the farmer as well as the level of the governor, probably.
Okay, thank you for Rhoda and Dr. Janice Lee. I hope that answer conclude our session for this workshop today. Rosawati, thank you for your questions. I'd like to thank Dr. Janice Lee for a very clear picture of the presentation, and Professor Jen Makroda for a very good insight for us now. And I believe that the workshop will bring something to ignite our future leaders here and participants to bring more issues and more awareness on what can be done to fight for deforestation. After this, participants will join their group session. The group session will be discussed in your group Zoom account, each of you, and then please collect or make a summary of the deforestation topic and submit the link. The link for the submission has been given to you in the rundown in the WhatsApp group. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Professor Jan Makroda. Thank you, Dr. Janice Lee. Thank you, Dr. Diana. Thank you, all the participants. I hope we can see you tomorrow in our next workshop. I send the session back to Ibu Diana to close the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rudy. Thank you, Janice. Thank you very much within your hectic time. And of course, to you, to Dr. Jean-Marc Roda. Thank you very much. I hope we still can do it another time because it seems like we receive so much new information that can proportionally assess about what is going on about deforestation. And before that, we are going to see some more videos about who are the participants here. While seeing that, maybe after that, we are just closing this for today, and we are going to continue for tomorrow for certification topics. And after that, at the last day, we are going to see how all of these topics that we already listened for the 3 days broaden your insights, your knowledge, and your perception about sustainable palm oil. Again, thank you very much. With this, we are going to just listen to the participants' introduction. Thank you, John Mark. Thank you, Janice. And thank you, Alain.
Hello everyone, so we are from Supply Chain Group 3 and today we would like to introduce ourselves to you guys. I'm not going to introduce myself, but instead we are going to show you our member. So now let's take a look of this picture. The girl that are very beautiful, right? So her name is Imt-Gt. You can call her just Intan, and she is from Indonesia. Now she's studying at Syekh Kuala University as a medical student. So about her birthday is on 20 October in 1999, so we are the same batch. She likes reading, playing guitar, and also singing. It's a nice musician, right? And of course, she's really passionate about public health, about environment, and also about education. And her motto is do your best and tawakkal. So her current favorite song is Hero from Fauzia, and don't forget to check it on YouTube or Spotify as you can. And okay, now it's Intan's turn.
Yo everyone, do you know what Pakistan is known for? Today, I would like to introduce you one of my friends that originally from Pakistan, so you can ask him a lot about it. His name is Abdullah Hamad, but you can call him Abdullah. He is a PhD student in Institute of Agricultural and Resource Economics, Faculty of Science, University of Agriculture, Faisalabad, Pakistan. Such a long name. But there's more. He was born in Faisalabad, Pakistan on January 14, 1996. He really liked to do social work and pleased to work as socio-political worker and student. Such a helpful person. He really passionate about his people and make them realize their own potential. His motto is never accept defeat. Cool. His favorite movie is called The Shawshank Redemption. I guess pretty nice name, right, for a movie? Okay, finally, Abdullah, now it's your turn.
Hi everyone. You already know about me, but you have to come about our very expert member in this group. Let me introduce Mr. Sulman Al-Haj Dadu. You can call him Mr. Suleiman, even though he is a PhD scholar in the School of Business and Economics, UPM. But he is actually from Nigeria, where from right here. He was born in Postaskum, York State, Nigeria on October 24, 1969. His hobby is traveling. Maybe that's the reason he works as a lecturer and a PhD scholar in Malaysia. Very cool. He is very passionate about education, environment issue. Almost the same with Intan. He has really good motto, Allah suffices us. He likes country music, for example, covered of our country, from Kenya Rogers. Alright, but not the least, Mr. Suleiman, the time is yours.
Hello, thank you, Abdullah, for introducing me. Now it is my turn to introduce the coordinator of our group, and her name is Fatima Jaru, but you can call her Fatim. She's from Thailand. Right now she is studying in liberal arts of Rajamangala University of Technology, Srivijaya. She was born in Yala, Thailand on September 3rd, 1999. She likes to cook and check her social media, such an active person. I hope the cooking will taste very good. She's really passionate about business and negotiation. Her motto is believe you can and you are halfway there. She likes Korean romance, comedy drama such as Secretary Kim, and she doesn't like horror movies. I think Korean influence is really high in Asia. Okay, I give time back to Fatim. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Mr. Sulaiman. Alright, that's all for us, and we really hope to know each other better. And we can wait to know more people from the another groups too. So let's be friends, why not, right? It's a very pleasure for us to know you guys. And thank you for watching. Goodbye.
we are from Group 4 and get to know more about us. First, I'm going to introduce my friend's name, Astia Yuliani. She was born in 11 December 1998 and she is 23 years old this year. She's Indonesian and she's from Jambi. She's currently pursuing her bachelor degree at University of Jambi, majoring in agribusiness. She likes to watch movies and cook. Her favorite food in Jambi is tempoyak and padamaram. If you want to get to know more about her, kindly go to her Instagram at Astia Yuliani.
Hi guys, so I would like to introduce our group member, which is Fanny, our leader for Group 4. She was 20 years old, birth on 22 March 2001, stayed in Medan, Indonesia. She took a course of Food Science and Technology in University of North Sumatra. She got a good hobby, which is cooking, banking, reading, and watching everything. She also likes to eat mie pangsit, which is her favorite food in Medan. You guys also can follow her on Instagram to know her better. You guys can follow Fanny Wijaya, which is FENNYWJYE. So bye.
Okay, the next one and only boy in Group 4, he is Fatur Ramadhani. He is 22 years old, born on June 4th, 1999. He is delegate from Mulawarman University. And his favorite food in Samarinda is amplang. You can find him in Instagram at urpat4699. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone, my name is Fatur Ramadhani. I am from Faculty Agriculture, Mulawarman University, Indonesia. I am very happy to join this program because I will know more about sustainability of palm oil. And I will introduce one of our group member named Halimatun binti Rosli at 23 August 1998, Resident Selangor, Nasional, Malaysia. Instagram Halimatun Rosli, Mayor Finance Institute, Northern University of Malaysia. Hobby doing exercise, watching movie, and hiking. Favorite food in Selangor is nasi lemak. See you soon.
Okay, udah ya? Kedengaran? Thank you very much. I think with this we will end today's session. But don't forget, we still have tomorrow session about certification, and then at the last day, 30th of September, we are going to hear. You are not going to listen to a presentation, but you are the one that will present whatever you absorb from the first day until the third day. I hope all of these materials, all these presentations are really useful for that, because all of them are presented by experts in that area. Again, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Pak Nasrullah is still here. John Makroda is still here. Jane is also, Pak Rudy, all advisors and all students. Thanks for all of your efforts. Don't forget to make a summary to the topic that we listened for today. Hopefully, the summary can be delivered in video form. Because it would be more interesting, and it would be a very good material for e-learning. Thank you very much. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye. Oh, okay. Sorry. We need to have a group picture. Please turn on your camera. Yeah. And give a big smile.
Okay, I will start for the first page. Okay, second page. Okay, thank you guys.
Bye-bye. See you, Andy. See you tomorrow.
Guys.
Eh, mana video?